Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another exciting episode of Why Bother with your host, John Szablewski, the podcast that didn't need to be made by the host who really didn't want to make it. Today, I am joined with a Buffalo theater legend, somebody who has worked very, very hard on creating the small details you might not think about. But because of these small details, your entire experience is so worthwhile. Today, I am joined with Diane Jones, prop builder, artist, and all things fine detail. And we're going to talk about theater, art, and her journey as a playwright. So without further ado, I want to introduce my good friend, Diane Jones. Hi, Diane. How's it going today?
I'm great. How are you, John?
I'm hanging in there. It's warm outside. The sun is shining. Let's do it. Let's go.
I'm ready. Bring it on.
So, Diane, I've known you probably, I had to do a little bit of research because I know we had talked about 2 years ago already about a show that you had written that was doing a weekend performance at the Kavinoky Theatre. And I interviewed you for my website, Buffalo Theater Guide. And that's a name drop, by the way.
I know, it was very good. I caught it.
and while we did that, I really took an interest in your career and what you do in the theater community. You know, it's sometimes we think about like, oh, it's the actors, it's the directors, but just as important, it's what we're seeing on stage. So props and artistry, it's the awesome field. So why don't we take a few minutes to just talk about your journey here?
Sure.
Start at the beginning. We don't want to miss anything.
Oh man.
And then we'll move on. So there you go.
Perfect. Well, first I have to say, when you interviewed me for your website, which reviews theater in Buffalo, it was a big day for me. It was a very big deal because I've always been the artist and I became a playwright. And to have somebody like yourself take the time to interview me and then be able to afford to put an ad up on your website, like, yeah, I'm making the big time in Buffalo. And everything was exciting. I'm not mocking. It was a very pivotal day for me. So I'm really glad we met that day.
That's awesome. I'm happy that I was able to assist you, and it was great getting to get to know you that way. And you got to keep my website running for another month.
You know what? I'll do what I can. Just don't raise the prices too much, and I can keep. I appreciate that. So I like to say, when it comes to my journey for propping, I guess I was pretty destined for it. I just never knew it. I've been a freelancer for 30 years and done lots of different jobs in the art and graphic design and photography and painting. And then I got hornswoggled into set designing, grade school, and you do it all. Grade school plays, middle school plays. And what I realized was all the odds and ends jobs I've had through the years, which there's been a lot of them, learning how to paint sign, learning how to do this, all comes into fruition when you become a prop master. But it didn't become evident until I went back to school at Buff State and went back to get my art degree. I was one of my bachelor's. And then I kind of slid into the theater department and I didn't want to leave. So once I realized that I could apply some art skills to the minutia of propping and my love for research, I've been thinking about this today. And I think what I like most about what I do for props is not actually just the props, it's doing all the research when you start a project. It's finding out what the play is about, when was it set, how is the director setting it, are we doing it anachronistically, or are we doing it in its actual time? I know, don't make me spell it. And I love that, and I love that about playwriting. I love that working in films. I just love setting a story. However that story is being relayed, you have to do your homework ahead of time. And if you don't do your homework, then that's when it's not as good. And you screw up and you look kind of foolish. You got to do your job. So if everybody does their part on a production team, then you bring some really neat stuff to life.
Sure. Now, you know, when you set out to do a show, you said there's research. I think that sometimes we really don't put a lot of stock as audience members into how much work it actually takes to put a production on. We go and we sit down in our comfy little velvet plush seat, and we have our illegal candy that we stuck in past the 90-year-old usher, and we sit there and we make noise, and we're like, we really didn't want to leave tonight. You know, it was cold outside, but we came. And you sit down and you see a show, and sometimes there might not be very many props, right? Maybe it's a very small show, or maybe, and I'm going to talk about this because I remember your Facebook post about it, maybe you'll have a show like Spamalot, where there's 8 billion props, and most of them last for about 10 seconds.
That's the difference, I think, between a musical and a play. Not always. Some plays can have lots of props, but you know what, John, you said, even if there's a play with 5 props, if I don't get those 5 props right, then it's going to be even more obvious. Sure. And as a prop master, I've said this many times, I never want to be in a review. I never want to be called out. I don't want anybody to ever say, well, everything was good until I saw that rotary phone, but that wasn't invented yet in 18. So unless that's purposeful to be there because of a vision of the entire team, you just got to do your job.
Yeah.
And get the stickers off and get the... You gotta know whether it should be cursive writing or if it's printed or if it's a typewriter or if it's a font. Everything's got its time and place.
Sure.
And I love that. That's what's kind of weird about it, because I kind of love that stuff.
You know, and I think what's really neat about it too is most audiences, you know, will go in to see a show and they'll know there's a time period. Like, you know, maybe they're going to see, you know, okay, we'll just use Spamalot, for instance. It's the Knights of the Round Table, medieval times.
Right.
Of course, there's a lot of really goofy.
There's a lot in there. I mean, there's spam in there too. So, I mean, where anachronistic props come in.
Yeah, it's very, you know, there is a time frame there, but then you have like these bizarre, like contemporary things that come out of nowhere. So I think getting that detail correct means so much more, and the audience will appreciate it. They might not realize why they appreciate it, but they do. Right. I remember reading a book about a gentleman from Buffalo, Jeffrey Denman, I believe was his name, who was in The Producers on Broadway in the original cast. And he talks about the prop master in that show getting pencils made and notepads made and stationery made for those scenes that had the name of the company, had the name of the people on the desks. Everything was very, very, you know, where it had to be. And it's just amazing, because I would never have thought to go that in depth. But I think people that are in your position really need to go that in depth, and otherwise it might not all work. So that's really cool.
Well, sometimes it's not just for the audience that I do what I do. Sometimes it's for the actors as well. Sure. So if I do a scrapbook or a notebook that's called on the stage, in Mamma Mia, she's flipping through her journal. Well, I spent time making that journal look like a journal. Not only, but then you have to be careful that you're not putting people's lines in there to get things confused. And so it's got to be a little gibberish as well.
Sure.
When there's a wallet, I had an actor in To Kill a Mockingbird open up a wallet, and he pulled out a photo of his son in the play. And I had done my research and got something that would fit that, who his son could be and who he could look like. And he said, wow, nobody sees that but me, but there it is. And he said, thank you, because it helps. I think, as much as I don't want an audience to go out of character, it's not, I don't want to do that to an actor as well. They're working really hard, and it's have to support that. And I appreciate that somebody appreciates that minutia.
Yeah. And you know, that's a fun word, because I hear that from a lot of people in the performing arts community. And especially music. Music directors and music people, the minutia.
Exactly.
So we have these props. We go and we work in the show. What happens? Where do you, as a prop master, take your marching orders from the director? At what point do you have the directors say, okay, you know what, Diane, we've had our production meeting, you're on your own, go, I trust you? Or is it one of those, we're going to hold your hand the entire time, and I want to make every decision?
Every director is different.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have to say most directors, they do a lot of research before we even get involved. Like, it's months out.
Mm-hmm.
I do the script, read it once, read it twice. I beat it out. I indicate wherever I can find a prop that might be inferred or actually in stage directions,
Mm-hmm.
even though we don't always use what's in the stage directions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a page number. What is the prop? Who uses it? What do I think it might be? And then I go to the director, and they already know. Well, maybe. Most directors have an idea, and they let me go. Now, there's a budget. So when you have a finite budget, you just can't be a wild person and go off and do whatever you want. It's important to be part of a collaborative team. Sure. So not only, though, the director, it's the set designer is my other boss.
Mm-hmm.
I have lots of bosses, but it's a good thing I don't mind. It's all good. It's about communicating. Mm-hmm. And it's about, I have to complete the vision for the set designer and the vision for the costumer as well, and the director, because that prop has to make sense color-wise and look-wise, and what is the director after? Do they want black or brown? I might be able to paint it, but maybe I can't, and I can only afford to buy it once or mm-hmm. build it once or whatever. So there's definitely, I'm free to go and do and build and explore, but it's within an umbrella of collaboration.
Sure. Yeah. That's very, very interesting. So now we have the situation where you're working on the show, and I'm sure some scripts, and I, as somebody, I've directed community theater, and sometimes it's a little bit different, because for me, I'm more of the minimalistic approach, mm-hmm. except I always find that I get asked to direct shows where there's a huge trial at the end, and we need like 1,000 things. It's always the trial. At
Any
the
director
end.
that tells me there's not many props, Diane, I'm like, no, that's the kid's stuff. Yeah, it's only this little bit here.
It's kind of like when you tell a customer, oh, the costumes aren't that difficult.
Right, no.
It's like, what is that?
But I think you've just added something right there, John, because it's not just looking at the script, it's the process of rehearsal. Mm-hmm. And that's why the stage manager and the director communicate during rehearsals. And I read a report every night, mm-hmm. and it says, well, we've discovered on page this line that we no longer need that prop, but we sure need these 3 other ones. And so it's ongoing. And I'm sure you've discovered that with directing, that you can't see everything, because actors make choices and you make different choices, and all of a sudden, so I can't get upset if I do something and it's pulled, mm-hmm. and I also can't get upset if I need to put something in, as long as it's not like the morning we're opening. That's sure. a little late, and
sure.
that gets my agina up a little. It stresses me. I'd rather by tech weekend.
It has to be ready to go.
The problem is set, and unless something has changed dramatically with, I don't know, I can't even imagine. I prefer to be set at tech weekend, and then just make whatever we've got. It's got to be just perfect as much as possible.
Great. So now, as a prop master, that doesn't always necessarily mean you're building from scratch, right? Sometimes that could be, hey, we're going to the AMVETS. And we're looking for something good.
Absolutely. It's buying as is. It's buying and changing. It's building from scraps I have collected through the years. So it's a combination of all those things. Yeah.
Yes. So, what would you say is the most exciting prop you've ever had to work on?
Oh man, that's on the list. I was supposed to be able to study. I think the one that terrified me the most was for the Foreigner at the Cav. Somebody builds a homemade detonator with dynamite next to it, and I built it. And I got a nice, like, 1970s case that went around like an old typewriter at AMVETS or Savers, and rebuilt the foam inside of it. And as I was driving to the Kavinoky that day, I'm like, all right, this is not the day to get pulled over. This is not the day. This is not the day to have to say to the police officer, I am a prop master. You don't know, but in the back of my van is a case. But I always, when I'm in those situations, John, I always keep my script in my backpack right next to me. And I'm like, I hear this. And luckily I've been able to, so every show has kind of a prop like that. I have a favorite prop from every show.
That's awesome.
Prop from hell from every show. Something you think is going to be so easy to find or build, and you can't. And you there is no can't. You have to do it. You have to figure it out, because if you don't, I mean, most of the time, the prop that you think, I imagine the prop that you think is going to be the easiest to find is one of the most important to the show. Of course.
Of course.
and then you find it after the show closes, the exact one you needed. So it's not romantic. It is, we need it, and we need it by this time. And so you have to use Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and I usually find another human being, and I send a text. I'm like, I'll be going here. If no one hears from me in a day and a half, this is the last place I've been. So just keep that in mind. All the AMVETs, all the thrift stores, regular stores, Amazon, and sometimes you just, and flea markets, but you don't have time to do a whole flea market and search for one item when you've got a list of 75 and you're doing 2 shows.
Sure.
So it's managing your time, managing your resources. And then we also have props we pull from in our theaters. Road Less Traveled has a prop house, or prop. Oh, I'd love a prop house. They have a prop room. Yeah. Kavinoky has a prop room. And so you can use stuff from your own sources, but usually when you do something set in 1960, the next time you do it is a number of seasons ahead. It doesn't tend to revolve quickly.
Yeah. So you brought up a funny thing. So you said that you had some dynamite in the back of your car for this show.
Of course, I built it. It's all fake.
Yeah. I have a similar situation that happened to me in college when I was in film school. So I wrote this script about a pretzel store, and a pretzel store. Yeah. So I think
sells pretzels. Okay.
Sells pretzels. And the idea is that the sales were boosting really, really high, and that they were sprinkling powdered cocaine on the pretzel.
Yeah, that's fun. Sure. Convince that.
So I'm driving around in my little 1988 Ford Escort with these bricks of sugar that I've made.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'm really looking forward to figuring out the story I'm going to have to tell. But if that wasn't the best part, next to it, I had a silver briefcase filled with counterfeit cash. Yeah.
You can't make these stories up. I can't imagine. I watch some of the movies sometimes where invariably cash is falling from the sky from an explosion of some sort. And it's just, it blows my mind how much fake stuff has to be obtained for certain films.
Yeah.
And for certain plays as well.
Sure.
A lot. And then if it's a play, it's done over and over and over. So it's not just one supply, it's multiple supplies. So
especially when there's that gut-wrenching scene where the protagonist takes that piece of paper and just
that is something I note right from the beginning. Hand to God, actor goes over to pull a poster off the wall, rips it up, not only rips it up, puts it in his mouth and chews it. And so now I have to think about, first of all, copywriting when I do the poster design, make sure it's legit. And then I have to make sure what ink is being used when we're printing this up that's going in my actor's mouth. As it's ripped apart every single evening. And that's just one of the things. So there's a hierarchy, and the things are the hardest you deal with usually first because it's a timeline. And you mentioned before how much longer it takes. Actors come in for this amount of time for rehearsal, which is terrifying, but that's why I'm not an actor. I like to be behind the scenes. And we start way back over here.
Mhm.
And so we've been working quite a while before the actors hit the rehearsal room. But still, there's a lot to do once the actors are there, and then you're up and running. It's like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, and it's a mind-boggling. So I would assume, now I may be wrong, I don't know, but as freelance, you probably are spoken to in a season production meeting, maybe before the season's announced, and you probably have a copy of a script way in advance.
Usually only a couple months ahead,
Couple
maybe.
months?
Yeah. That's a good question. I'm brought into production meetings once I'm on board for that show.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm never part of deciding what a season would be, because that would be the artistic director's
Mm-hmm.
job. And sometimes I don't even know who the cast is until emails start coming out. I'm part of the production team, so I know who the production team is. So it's always fun, first meeting where everybody's there with the cast and we do a read through. I'm like, oh, sweet. Because it's there. I have friends and acquaintances and people I look up to in Buffalo. So it's you're not doing it because it's $1 million job. You're doing it because you like what you're doing, and it's people you're doing with it that keep you going through what we do, to put on a show that gets torn down the same day as the last performance.
Right?
Right?
I tell people that,
and you start over, but it's a story. It's the ability to tell a story is more important than having it stay forever.
yes. I have conversations. So same thing out at the community theater in Aurora, East Aurora, New York, Aurora Players. I worked with them on last season. I probably helped build every single set.
Nice.
Right? So the first show we did last season was Present Laughter by Noel Coward, and the set designer David Hall. If you don't know him, you should. He's awesome.
Nice.
He's like,
I will find.
He's one of my best friends. Like this guy. He sits down and he's like, so anyway, he wanted to make these curved walls.
Oof.
So he did all this research, and we decided that paneling would curve for us so we could do what he had to do. And we spent, he's like, John, why don't you come help me? We're going to spend a weekend building this grand staircase. It was three weekends that we were building this.
Just like doing any
3 weekends.
3 times as long. Yeah.
Yes. So they were doing it, and people came and saw the set and they loved it. And then show's done, another show's up, tear it all down. And I don't think people necessarily understand that, because they don't necessarily see set design or set building as an art, because it's there. It's huge, right?
It's and when they build the mini set with all the little miniature furniture, I practically get tears in my eyes, no matter who it is, whether I'm at the Road Less Traveled or the Kavinoky or other theater companies in Buffalo. When that model comes out, I'm like, oh, it's like it's just awesome, and it's important because it's important for the director. It's important for the actors. It's where you first get a sense of what your space is going to be on the stage, and what I have to do within that space, because sometimes I set dress and do props. And you've got to know the whole vision. And then sometimes there's stages that revolve and go upside down and trap doors, and you're like, oh, okay, not my job.
Trap doors. Oh my goodness.
My job. No, exaggerating for hyperbole there. I don't think I've had have we had a trap door? I don't think so.
Well, after they watch this interview.
All right, I'll remember then. I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I'll text you. I'll be like, yes, I did. Or I didn't. Yeah, but that's what it is. It's getting that experience.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So as a, now sometimes as a director, I'll come up with this vision, and I feel like that phrase, the vision, is so cliche and overused, but I'm going to use it because I can't think of something else to use in its place right now.
Because the leader's got to have it, so we all can figure out how that's going to come to life.
Yeah. But do you want to know? I found the way that you can make your entire production team despise you. Are you ready for this?
Bring it on.
Tell them you're doing your entire production in black and white.
Oh no. Because you're talking about Little Shop of Horrors?
When I directed back in Christmas time, Miracle on 34th Street.
Right? Oh,
everything was in black and white.
Oh no, I love that. Well, I know Aurora did Little Shop of Horrors and only had the plant in color, right?
Yep, and I was in that production. That was the first thing
that is stupendous. Now, as a designer, I would love that kind of challenge.
Yeah, it was.
I might curse a little, but not much. Just good to be challenged.
Our makeup designer for Miracle, she's like, I'm out.
You're on
but it worked. It worked. So
I bet it did. That's awesome.
Yeah, so just black and white. If you want to really throw your designing team under the bus.
I'm never going to be a director, but I'll know how to do it if I ever have. This is good. I did take directing once, and I loved it.
Yeah, it's definitely it's hard. It is very hard, especially people who are when you get a script and you look at it and you come up with this idea. Oh, I really think this would be great. And you're talking to other people and you're like, I think I'd really like you to help me with this, or I think that'd be great. And getting everybody on the same page is a lot of work, and then you get the actors, and the actors are just excited to be there. So you could say we're doing this whole thing underwater with scuba gear, and they're like, oh, great, it's fantastic. That's a great idea. I'm going to write that down, actually. Miracle on 34.
Some people can't swim. It's not a good thing.
So, Diane, in the last few years, film has really become a big part of the Buffalo community. We have the Buffalo Niagara Film Commission that's been really driving home getting films, big budget films to come here. And you've worked on some of those for prop stuff.
What's nice is the theater season is usually late August or August through June. And there's not as much summer theater around here, so I pick up when I can and able and privileged enough to pick up some film work. I grab it and run. But I don't do props in film. Usually I do set dressing. Set decorating. Sorry. All these terms, I get all confused. So set dressing, theater. Set dressing, yes. Set decorating, film. So I'm a set decorator in film.
Very cool. So we do have a question here from our good friend Kyle Mecca.
Kyle, how exciting!
So Diane, what is the most challenging difference working in theater compared to film?
Well, two things. I think maybe many things. For film, it's a different kind of pressure. David Butler is a dear friend, and he introduced me into the film world because he knew I did theater work. And he said to me, it's pretty much like tech day every day. Every day you work film. So it's a theater tech day every time you work film. And theater tech days are long days, arduous, and there's always stuff changing. So it's being completely flexible. It's meeting deadlines immediately. When my very first film, David Butler moved into set decorating, and they needed a set deck buyer. So I went in to do that, and you would go in the morning, and by morning I mean early, and you get a list, and it was set in the early 1940s, and you had that list, and it was due at the end of the day, if not sooner. And we don't have prop houses, warehouses, and set deck warehouses. In Hollywood, you go to a warehouse, you get in a truck, and you stop at the 1940s section, and you said like that. And it's still not all there, but at least you've got that. So here, it is in theater, you don't want the audience to see a prop and get lost because you've screwed something up. Film, you don't want a shot not to happen because you didn't get the work done. So it's a lot of pressure. And in theater in Buffalo, small budgets, gotta really be specific and get it right as close to the first time as possible. In film, the set decorator usually wants 4 toasters to pick from, or 3 toasters, multiples of things. So it's not just finding the right one thing, it's finding 3 that would work, because they're doing multiple sets in a day and they have tables full of stuff to make that all work. So the adrenaline doesn't stop on film. So what was the question, Kyle? What's the biggest difference?
Yeah, what is the most challenging difference?
Okay, I think we've done pretty good. And then the other thing is, in film, they can get this close, right? You know this, John. You don't know where the camera's going to end up. When you're working theater, it's a process. You watch it evolve. You sit through tech weekends, and you can see how the lights and everything is looking. And oh, that choice of white there, not a good choice. You got to fix it. When it's film, it's you don't know where the camera's going to go, so everything has to look its best at all times. There's the 1-inch rule versus the 12-foot rule. But when I'm on theater, I'm just such a type A. I do the 1-inch rule there too, because you never know. It's probably for some of my friends that are like, gotcha, that was wrong. And I'm like, I know, but I only had so much money. I did my best. and in film, you cannot miss the date. If it's the first 6 months of 1941, that's what you can use, or anything earlier than that. In theater, I can use 1941 the whole year, and maybe a couple months into the year above it, because it's a different vibe when you're setting a scene for the theater versus film. Because film, people can pause it and say, "What is that? Why is that there? That wasn't invented. That coffee can logo didn't exist yet. How do I know? Because I had nightmares about that." So luckily the coffee can got cut, and I don't have to worry about that. But I didn't know that for 6 months. It's like, no one would know that but me, but I knew.
Yeah.
The can was in that scene, and that logo didn't exist for 6 months after that particular time frame of that world. Does it really matter? Yeah, it does. If I'm going to be hired to do something, I'm going to try my best.
Sure. And so when you say that you get this list, because, it was funny. So this one giant film project that came through Buffalo a few years ago, I was hired to be a PA in the art department for one day. I didn't have my own laptop at the time. I was hitting hard times.
You can't do it.
So I had to walk. And then same project, I was hired as an extra and was not used. So I was fired twice from the same film.
Yeah. Most of the stuff we do, you don't see.
Oh, yeah. But it was great. It was a nice experience. Anyway, what I always thought was fascinating is, you think of like old Hollywood, and you think of like the prop house, and I always thought about like, like there's this little old lady like Ethel, and she's like worked there for 5,000 years, and she knows where everything. Yeah, Gray. She's a chain smoker. She's got like one of those Cruella de Vil.
No. She can't ruin the props with smoke. You got to change this image. I can't.
She likes to chew a lot of gum.
Okay, right. Not as good, but I'll take it.
She blows those bubbles and it gets in her hair, so it's a mess. Anyway, so she knows where everything is, and then you have like these hair and makeup people that are just they're doing it 100 years. They got rollers on their fingers and they're helping people. That's the image of Hollywood that I always thought. And then working on it, I'm just so amazed how anything ever gets made, because you sit there and it just seems like there's no bottom in this infrastructure. It's like, we're going to give you a check, and we're gonna move into your city, and we're going to find somebody who we don't know and trust them to find us what we need. And if they don't pull through,
but part of that is the challenge of me being someone from Buffalo, New York. I went to school in New York City, and of course that is like, oh, you're from upstate. Well, no, actually I'm from Western New York, but everything is upstate from New York. And so I've always battled growing up in the country, being from the Buffalo area, and just not being from a big city. So when a lot of people come to Buffalo and say, oh, you guys can't do it, I'm like, oh, yes, we can. Not only can we do it, we can do it with the best chicken wings and food in the area, and we can do it with a really good attitude and get it done, because there's a real sense of community pride with, definitely in the art department. I know it's not we versus they. It's just I know we don't have what you have, but we're resourceful.
Yeah.
Because we're what is that called? Rust Belt City. We've always had to be resourceful. Nobody says you guys are wonderful. I don't want to be wonderful. Then stay away. I like it the way it is. Let us work hard and do what we need to do. And I love proving that Buffalo's got the architecture. It's got the chops. It's got the people. We've got so many antiques. I know. It's kind of the exciting part about it. And then it's the battle. It's like a huge race. I never watched The Amazing Race, but that's what it feels like. Like it's this treasure hunt you have to go on. And when you're done, there's a spot, there's always a warehouse that's been separated into each scene. And what I love about film, it's a bigger community you join. So I have this one job that I do, and I do it 12 hours a day or more. And that is one little cog in the wheel, and I drop the stuff off, and then it goes to be aged or changed or whatever. But it all ends up in a warehouse where that's that room, and that's where all the stuff that makes this imaginary world, that room in that film, come to life. So there's a huge amount of organization. This level of organization is unbelievable. And then you got weather.
Yeah.
For Crown Vic, it was mostly outside, which was terrifying because I am a mole at life. I like to be underground in the dark. And I realized I was going to be set decking outside all the time, all summer long, going, oh, there's not enough SPF to get me through this. But I did it, and I did it very happily. But you have to have backup sets in case of weather changing. So
sure,
it's you're not just working on one thing, you're working on 4 things at a time.
Yeah. And you know,
thanks for asking, Kyle. That's a difference too between the two.
and you know what else? I think what I find so fascinating about the differences too is film is very hurry up and wait,
right?
Where theater is hurry. It's just there's no wait. It's hurry. It's hurry.
Right. It's yes, I agree.
And I find that it's hysterical because like the art department has to be ready before the production team could even really come in and get stuff.
Absolutely.
But it's always the production team that you're waiting on to move forward to the next thing. It's like it's the
way it is. Yeah.
It's fascinating, and I remember walking through on the set of this large film that I was fired from twice. And
film names. I just need you didn't clarify that at the beginning of our rules.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about it, but
no, either. Just no, you go right ahead. Keep going.
No. So it was just the attention to detail and the architecture. And it's funny. So my girlfriend and I will travel across the Northeast, and by the Northeast I mean like Pennsylvania. Downtown Buffalo, maybe sometimes going to Canada, and I'll always comment on the architecture. Right, it's a whole other country. I'll comment on the architecture, and I'll be like, we don't get this anywhere else. That is an art form, And she's like, can't you enjoy the weather? Can't you just no.
I've been this way since I was a kid. Somebody would say you won $1 million, but you have to spend it laying on the beach. I'd be like, take the money. I can't. Unless I'm writing a play while I'm laying on the beach or doing something, I can't just. I get bored, and boredom is good because it allows the mind to be calm, but not very often.
Yeah, no. All throughout quarantine, working from home, I'm sure you had a similar situation. I don't know many people that were out and about up until probably Memorial Day weekend, where the world was like, we've had enough. So I found that the hustle and bustle that I was so used to, it was very nice to just be able to step back from that for a little bit and work on things around the house that you've been wanting to do
Right.
your personal artwork or your personal projects. So I even though we're learning in the news about new stuff about this COVID-19 now and blah 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 blah, I do not regret that time whatsoever, because that's a gift. I mean, you know this time. When do we ever have extra time? We never have extra time.
My studio got a deep cleaning for the first time in probably a decade.
There you go. I mean,
and it clears your mind when you clear your environment. I mean, it wasn't, but it was time. It needed drawers and stuff, and I still have college stuff stuck in spots from the first time I went to college, and that's 30 some years ago. I know right where everything is. There's a little game my husband and I played, and he's like, do you have X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, within 2 minutes I can find anything.
Well, there you go.
A text from my son in California. Do you have a picture of me when I was in some play in 8th grade? I'm like, please hold.
There it is.
So, but you still have to organize that madness on occasion.
Yeah.
And so I've organized the computers. I've organized my space. I've done some artwork, and I've done some writing, and it feels good to just take a breath, because it is and has been a little bit terrifying, some of the stuff we go through in this pandemic. It's the unknown of all the things that is the hardest part. And I deal with anxiety in real life, and add to it real life anxiety coming in. It's tricky.
I called my doctor. I had the first week we went into quarantine, I was sick, but I'm telling you, I think it was like not the cool new flu. It was like last year's model. It was like the iPhone like 10, like not the cool one. And I was just curious if they wanted me to come get tested, and they're like, we don't think you have it from what you're telling us. I said, okay, fine. And I was like, I'm just anxious about it. She's like, honey, at the rate we're going, we're going to have to put like Ritalin in the water supply just to calm everybody down.
It's not a false statement. There's no doubt. Yeah. It's been quite a ride. I've learned a lot about myself, and now with everything else that's going on, I think it's important that we look at things within the theater, and what can I control, and what can I change, and what can I think about. And I've actively been challenging myself to do that stuff, and it feels good.
That's good. That's that mental health. That's that mindfulness. That's awesome. Well, we're gonna
go.
We're gonna bring this party up a little, because now I'm feeling like I need to have a violin play in the background here, and so let's talk a little bit about some of the art that you brought with us, brought here today. Okay, so let's see here. We have this. So tell us a little bit about your fish.
My fish. This was from Big Fish, and it was a delightful musical at Second Generation Theater, and they needed beanbag fish from down south. And so I had to research my fish and figure out color schemes and what would last. So I had old canvas, and that's old paint. And I had old beans in the cupboard, because why do I buy beans that are dry? I never use them, but I buy them. I put them in fish. And it was one of the funnest is the word? Funnest? Yeah, I think it is a word.
We'll use it.
Thank you. It was a delightful project, and that's just some of the fish, and they just threw them around in one of the dances, and I loved it. So that's my big fish.
That's awesome. I really like the attention to the detail when you get up close is very impressive.
Well, and they're in the Smith Street Theater, so it is the 1-inch rule there, because there's people sitting right up next to the stage, so you can't be messing around.
Oh yeah, it's I like to call like that place like the splash zone.
Absolutely. Yeah, that comedian where it's the watermelon, and you got to have a
Gallagher.
Gallagher. Thank you very much. Both of you have to find names for me.
The Sledge-O-Matic.
This was a great project. Ann Emo, Buff State, costume design, and we had to take a fable. I can't recall. Forgive me for not recalling the assignment, but I went into East Berlin and before the fall of The Wall, and did design work, and I just loved this project because I got to use art collage and graphic design and cool punk buttons.
Yeah, this is neat. So is this what they would call a concept board? Is this
Yes. Well, it would be a design board.
design board?
If I ever did costume design, it would be good if I was a seamstress as well. It's like watching Project Runway, and you really should know how to sew, and I do. But the designer works in concept. So yes, this would be at the first meeting, at the production meeting. This is what I'm working on. Some of it would go through to the end. Most of it would get tweaked, but at least it gives the other designers a concept of what the costumes might look like.
Very neat. It's
Thank
very
you.
cool. I really like the it looks like what, spray paint on the background with the buttons and the different.
Yes. I had my mask.
Yeah, you had your mask before it was trendy, so you're
true. I had masks right away because not many, but I had enough paint spray masks. It was good to go.
Yeah. So we laughed earlier about this picture.
Yeah, tell me why, John. Have you already drawn this at Buff State? That's
yes.
Out in the drawing room.
Yeah, and you know what's so funny about it is this is the intro to drawing, still life, and I worked and it was funny. So when we went in, when I went to become an art teacher, we had to take all these studios, and I hadn't really done a lot of drawing. My art, filmmaking, digital, new media.
Right,
so I had to learn the fine arts, and they put me in drawing one, and my professor says, "Oh, you're going to be fine. You're going to be able to draw great by the end of this." And I said, "You want to put some money down on this?"
Sorry, I love that. You made it through the class, though, right?
I did. I was on my arms and knees as I'm crawling through the mud, but I did it.
It's hard, but it
is.
I love drawing, and I love taking a flat piece of paper and making it look like it's 3D. But it's arduous.
It is
a lot.
It is.
That's big. That's like, I don't know, 24 inches by
18 by 24. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty sizable. And those are lots of little pieces of pencil on there.
Yeah, the graphite. But the funny thing is this still life is still there. And if you go down the hall,
not much.
If you go down the hall to the painting studio, there's a jar of pickles there from like the silent era of film, and it's like the water in the juice of the pickle is like black. Like it's just gross.
Still life. I like that.
All right, so
this was fun. This was a design project above State, and I just loved it. Let's see. My collage people, Joseph Cornell. He's an inspiration, an artist who does a lot of collage work. And this was just an outstanding project. And not that it's outstanding, I just really enjoyed doing it. This is my thing. I like collage work. I like boxes. I like preserving things and making a statement with it. So this is a lot of different stuff, and it's all found objects. Nothing was purchased, including the foam core that went around it. And it was all painted, spray painted. And if I could do this every day of my life, I would. See, so I would like to do your black and white project because it forces you to look at depth different ways. It's like looking at old film noir.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to send you some of the pictures from the show because it was pretty awesome.
Love to see.
Pretty awesome. This reminds me of, you said found art. It almost reminds me a little bit of Louise Nevelson meets Dadaism.
Right. I almost see like a red fox coming through there or something. Just one.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's very, very cool. Very cool. All right. So now how we met was by doing the production, your show. I interviewed you for Forget Me Not.
Right.
And it was a show, and if I remember correctly, I actually pulled up my review, my preview piece that I did because I said, this has been a little while. I wanted to make sure I remembered. 2 years.
Yeah.
And I remember I was substitute teaching at the time, and I think I called you during my lunch break or something to do it. So Forget Me Not. Why don't we talk a little bit about the premise, why you wrote it, and how it got its start?
Okay. Last thing first. Got started up upstate in an intro to theater project. Final project was you have to write a 10-minute play. Maybe it was a 20-minute play. And I was challenged. We were all challenged to write about something you're passionate about. And I knew I had this box of letters and correspondence from my grandmother, my grandfather, my great uncle, and all the relatives around that from World War II. And I'd never read through all of them. I'm like, well, that might be interesting. And maybe it's time to dig into that. And that has turned into a almost decade-long project of writing a story about my grandma, her first husband, who was killed in the Battle of the Bulge, and his brother, who survives and comes back, marries my grandmother, and he was my grandpa all these years. So it's kind of that triangle. Oh. And the story that my great aunt told me was that my grandma received the telegram, and I looked up, because I love that dramaturgy research stuff, that it was a blustery, snowy, windy night in Limestone, New York that night, because I could look back and find a weather forecast in a Bradford newspaper for that day. I just love that little stuff. She got the telegram, tucked it in her pocket, walked upstairs and locked herself in a room. And I just have always felt something connected to that, and how interesting it would be to explore. Let's say she was in that room for an hour. What was she thinking? What was she doing? So I wrote a play about the ghosts in that room. And then it evolved into adding my own personal journey with mental health. And so I start the play the day my beloved grandmother dies, and I'm suicidal. And she brings me into that room with her, and I learn a lot of coping mechanisms and about life and how she gets through things. And so she leaves the attic and I can leave as well. A little better for knowing history, as it were. And I've never, I think it's important to talk about mental health issues.
Definitely.
It didn't start that way, and I never wanted to be a character in the play. That was something that came a lot later on. But once it was there, I'm like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
And we went. And then we took it to Edinburgh, Scotland, and that was super cool.
Yeah, so you've sent us some pictures from that, so I'm going to pull those up. Sure. And this was really neat. So you did, if I remember correctly, you did a weekend performances at the Kavinoky, and that was a very big success for you. You really got to put it up on its feet. Right. And I think a lot of times, people think that when you write a play that people just write it and, it's published and here you go. That's not the case at all. With anything, there's workshopping, table reads.
Oh yeah, there were 2 workshops before that. There were 3 readings before that. No, I'm sorry, 1 workshop, 3 readings, and then a weekend play. And then you keep going. It's not, you have to see it in different iterations to make sure that it's as good as it can be before you put it out there. There it is. That's my grandma, my grandpa, and my grandpa, or my grandpa and my great uncle. And that's a painting I did, and I designed the poster, because it's good to be a graphic designer and a producer. It saves a little money sometimes.
Sure. It's in the film world we would call that the auteur, but I don't. I don't know of many auteurs anymore. I guess you could say any person in film school right now would be an auteur. But this is a really awesome style. So you said you paint that. Did you paint the portraits and then overlay them onto a background, or is it all one painting?
The source material for the 3 people are 3 separate photographs. That I painted, and I painted them in grayscale. You'll be happy to know.
I appreciate it.
They were all in color, and I made it in grayscale. I found the photograph in the far back is an actual photograph of limestone from the 20s and 30s. The green side at Nicholson Square at the bottom is their template that they ask us to use. And so it's painting, collage, graphic design, filters. The green things are shells that Harry was killed by an exploding shell. So that's just a little something there for color and for pertinence.
Yeah.
But
so,
yeah,
so when you have this show and you submit it to a fringe festival, and for those of you who don't know what a fringe festival is, it's typically a week or a weekend of short form theater or performing arts events that don't always necessarily have a connecting theme. It's just different things, almost like a film festival, but for theater. So Edinburgh, talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So it started right after World War II ended, the festival itself. And in Edinburgh, there was a highbrow festival planned. It was either 47 or 49. My facts are a little off today. Sorry, but it's one of those years. And the highbrow festival was the symphony and opera and high art, as it were. And around the edges, the fringe started, which was, well, we're not that, we're this, and we're going to do our version of what we can do. And so both of those festivals still exist and coexist. In Edinburgh, though, it's a whole month. It's not juried, it's not adjudicated, so it's confusing and it's overwhelming. So I found someone from New York City who went to Buffalo State, Peter Michael Marino, who teaches, you pay for counseling sessions on how to get in, how to do this, how to take it one step at a time and not lose your mind. And he recommended that we, do the Buffalo Infringement Festival first, and we needed to get a venue. If you don't have a venue is a place to perform. You can't do the fringe, but you have to be accepted into a venue. And he said, World War II. They love it still at the end of anything with World War II. And the fact that you are the playwright, and this is a story about your people in World War II, is going to be something that they are going to be interested in. So we offered 3 different venues that would be, because he's been there many times and performed there many times, would be interested. Contacted the first one, didn't hear back. I had an option to call the second person, so I called, and within a half hour, I'm like, sure, we'll give you a venue. Well, nothing's given to you. We'll let you have a venue, and then we set up contracts, and you're off. That means now, okay, we're going to Edinburgh. So the production end of it is almost as big as writing the play, because you have to find a place for people to stay. You have to have insurance to cover the venue. You have to pay for the venue. You have to take care of your advertising. You have to pay to get into there's ticketing over there. There's, if you have music, you have to pay for the rights to use that through, we have it here in the United States. They have a version of it in Edinburgh. You have to get the actors who are able, ready, willing, and able. You have to raise money. But why not? Because it's awesome. So we went for half the festival. It's a lot to ask somebody to go for a whole month. Myself.
Oh my goodness, a month! Wow,
that's
impressive.
We were there for 2 weeks, and then when you're there, you have to. So everything had to be pared down. The Kavinoky was an attic, and it was full of junk, and it was great. It was just an attic. When you're in Edinburgh, it's more like the shows you like to direct. No prop. It's like no prop. And we had 3 weapons. We had a hunting rifle, a carbine, which is a military rifle, and a military pistol. I'm not traveling to a foreign country. And then you have to also think about not even using a fake gun. I don't want to, because the actors you saw in some of the pictures, our actors were in costume, and they pass out postcards, and it's hawking. It's thousands of people from all over the world, and you do your show, and then everybody gets out of costume, and you have the rest of the day and the night to go see other shows from all over the world and explore and do things you wouldn't normally do and see things you wouldn't normally see. And but not even a plastic weapon. Didn't even want that. So the actors learned how to mime weapons, and they learned how to. They mimed a lot of the show had to go from an hour and 10 minutes down to 50, which was tricky, and now it's back up to about an hour and 7 minutes. I just finished a virtual reading of it on Zoom.
Very cool.
Because I needed to get a time and get it back up to the right length of time.
So what's the plan with the show now? Are we hoping to get it published so that you can put it towards your retirement? Or
my husband Tim says often that, and I'm like, honey, you married an artist? And out of all the things theatrical, playwrights don't really, I don't think $50 a show, if it ever gets performed, is going to retire us anytime soon.
Hey, it works for Terrence McNally. It can work for anybody. Right?
So there's something called New Play Exchange. Are you familiar?
I've heard of it. Sure,
okay,
sure.
So I've joined the New Play Exchange, and I am now. So it's been copyrighted. I need to update the copyright. It's a Zoom reading that's going to go out into the public on YouTube for people to comment on for 1 week. 1 week only.
Ooh.
And then I'm done. I finished the edits, send in a new version for updating copyright, and then I finally upload it to New Play Exchange, and that's where it sits. And maybe someday someone else will do it. And I would also like to maybe do one more festival in New York City.
Sure. I think what's so awesome about talking with you about this experience is that we hear a lot about people, critics, and I always say, like, I'm not a critic, I'm a reviewer. I can critique you, but I'm really just reviewing your show, right?
That's because we're artists and we're used to critiques.
Yes, and I find that sometimes my elephant skin, as they say, is not as thick as it should be, but that's a whole different story. So
that.
What was his name? Roger Ebert.
Okay,
film critic.
Right.
He wrote a film, and he had it made, and it was not great. It was not a great film, but what it did was it showed people that he was somebody that understood what it would take.
Right.
So what's so awesome about your show, and I'm not saying your show is not great, because I've heard nothing but good things about it.
All right, critic.
I've heard great things. But what's so cool is somebody like yourself who works on the behind the scenes aspect of theater so much, the inners workings of it, and to be able to create your own production is such a feat and such an honor, I would say, for you, because there are very few people, everybody says, oh, I have the great American novel. Oh, I got the great American short story, great American play. But people just don't always follow through. And if you're not going to follow through, how does anybody ever see what you've accomplished? So I think you should be very, very proud of that. So I congratulate you.
Be a better prop master or whatever else I do, because the more you push yourself to learn something new, the more you appreciate the people along the way.
Most definitely. Definitely.
I've been able to work with are extraordinary. I'll get all verklempt if I think about it, because I've never been super concerned that every single word that I write is so perfect that it should be carved in granite, because that's just not my style. Maybe it's the art of collaborating with all things we do. I feel like I have a dramaturg I work with, who is a researcher, and he also helps me edit. He's wonderful, Matt, and he challenges me. He said something was long in the tooth the other day. Not that I'm bringing that up again, but
oh,
but he was right. It's just like when you're doing some graphic design. After a while, you don't see it anymore.
Yeah.
You're reading copy. You get so enmeshed in stuff. You don't see the typos anymore. You need somebody else to go long in the tooth, typo there. What is this? And you're like, oh, missed that. You're right. I hate when you're right, but you're right. And I love the fact that Forget Me Not has been shaped at Buff State in a class, and then at the Manny Friedman Play Workshop, and then a reading, and every time it was with a new group of people, a new director and actors. they heard something different. They gave me different feedback, and it evolved because of that. Even in Edinburgh, we had reviewers.
Mm.
And the best thing you can do is have someone in a foreign country who has no clue what your play's about, doesn't know you at all, come in and say, well, that was a piece of crap, or that was pretty good. Either way, you're going to learn from it, right? And I learned from it. I learned what people understood. I also understood that they were listening to it with hearing an accent.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. And I made a couple of changes because of how people perceived and saw things. I now have a prologue, which is very short, but there's a one line, and I will never forget. It's the review that I didn't put up because, well, it was a harsh one, but it was important. And this lovely woman said, there's a line in the play where my grandma says, you don't know why I'm so confused about this card game. We don't usually play cards up here, do we? And she used that in the play to say, I agreed with your grandmother right there. I didn't know what the hell was going on. Too many things going on, and I couldn't understand who was who. She said, now at the end, I got it, and it came together, and there were some lovely stories throughout it. But I went, and every time I hear that line, I wish I could find her and send her a note and say, thank you. Because of you, now, mind you, it was an abbreviated version, and so you really had to jump in and hold on.
Yeah.
Now there's a short prologue that introduces the characters, that helps people out, because nobody reads programs. And I design them. I understand that. Nobody reads signs. So I'm never upset with anybody that says anything. If somebody's going to take the time to say something, as long as you're not rude.
Yeah.
I love critiques.
Yeah.
Because I started in 4th grade. You always got to have your artwork critique. But if you have a good teacher and everyone is critiquing, you're going to learn something about all 20 pieces that are in that room.
Yeah.
And it'll be better for all of that.
Yeah.
You can't take it personally. I know my skin isn't as thick as it should be, but I do know I like that collaborative nature. And, it's all over my face when it stings sometimes, but you're like, but it's okay to have a sting, because you need to just take a breath and say, well, where are they coming from? You don't have to always change things, but it's important to listen.
It is. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's important to listen. And you know what? I'm sure there's people listening to this interview right now that know me, and they're like, how hypocritical are you? You always complain about this stuff. I was like, yeah, I can complain about it, but I also listen to it.
And I just want to say the other thing about going to Scotland was the Scotch. So, there was that.
Well, I mean, if it's not
whiskey, but I call it Scotch. I've been corrected. In the United States, we call it Scotch. In Scotland, you call it whiskey. Sorry.
Oh, well, it's
whiskey to me is Jack Daniels. That's not Scotch.
Number 7. That's
great.
Well, Diane, we have one more picture here, and I love this because this is.
Oh, I think I know which one.
This is great.
Thank you.
So I need to know.
Okay.
Now, if I remember correctly, I was reading that this has been a work that has evolved over some time.
Yes.
So let's just talk a little bit about the self-portrait.
It's huge. It's way too big, but I wanted to do a big piece. So it's like 4 feet by 3 feet, which is really a big piece. And I had a tough year about 22 years ago. I was in the psych ward a couple times on suicide watch. It's not a downer, it's just a fact. And I came out of that, and I decided to do this huge painting. So all the green and the yellow and kind of that gray at the bottom, that's all the original painting. Well, I got tired of the original painting after 22 years. So we smoked cigars and had Scotch at Christmas time in our backyard with all our adult children and their +1s and my husband. And Harry was taking pictures, and he took this picture of me smoking a cigar, which I proudly smoked because my grandmother was a rebel on my father's side and smoked cigars when she was a teenager on Sundays after Christmas and wore trousers. And this was in the 20s. So I just a long stock of crazy women. And I decided to do a huge portrait, and it was fun. And so it's painted, and then I did some graphic design work on top of it. And then there's a weasel on my shoulder, and that weasel is actually a 3D weasel. That it's a weasel. weasel. What's the other term? It's or make weasel. No, it's I don't know. It's a measle or a wink. I can never remember. No, it's a weasel. And he's my wonderful uncle was a hunter, and he found the weasel and had it taxidermied. I don't think he killed the weasel.
Oh my goodness!
He wasn't out weasel hunting, and he gave him to me, and so now he sits proudly on his shoulder. There it is. That's pretty much me in a nutshell. Only with shorter hair now.
Oh my goodness! So I have to say it was funny. So I'm driving home from work today because we had to go in, and I was thinking about this picture, and I said, I got to make a comment about it, and I said, somebody who can sit and smoke a cigar, they're a really cool person. Like they sit there, they take in the world, right? They take in the world. I don't smoke, but if I did, it'd be cigarettes because I'm an anxious mess. Just.
Don't do it. Don't do it. But I only smoke outside. Cigars are very smelly. So.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean. So. Yeah. Right? So I have one last question for you, and I like to talk to my art friends about this.
Okay.
Who is your favorite artist?
Well, I'm going to go with categories first, which is surrealism.
Okay.
So within that category, I never have known how to pronounce his name. Magritte?
Sure. Sounds right.
Rene Magritte? The pipe and the apple and the exactly.
I have an artichoke here. I'll put
there it is. And that and Joseph Cornell. And they're both pretty diverse. They're not really linked together, but that's kind of where I land. And I love the dreamscape of things.
Yeah.
Well, you've got the screen behind you. It's.
I do. This is the best $40 I ever spent.
I love it. I feel like. Yeah. All right. Who's your favorite artist?
Okay. So back in January, I was able to go to my favorite artist's museum, Andy Warhol.
Oh.
And I get a lot of flack for Andy Warhol. I love pop art.
But I love pop art. It's great.
I think the reason why is because pop art has such a controversial nature in that people don't really believe that what they did was art, right? I said, I think it's the humor behind the idea that really draws me to it. I absolutely love Andy Warhol's work, but I also like that he didn't just paint. He did all types of different art: filmmaker, photographer, playwright, actor.
But he's mostly known for Campbell soup cans.
And in my hallway in my house, I have 3 Andy Warhol soup cans hanging there, and I just love his work. And going to the museum in Pittsburgh was just an awesome experience because you get to see the different and how big everything was. It's huge, so you have an appreciation for it. But it's living artist. I would have to say Philip Berg.
Very good.
And I'm friends with him on Facebook, so I hope he watches this so that he says I'd like to do an interview with you, John.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Diane. I really did appreciate talking with you today. And ladies and gentlemen, Diane Jones, she is a definite legend here in the Queen City. So thank you so much for coming out today. So this was another episode of Why Bother. If you enjoy what you watch, please like and subscribe to us on Facebook and on YouTube. We are now streaming live to YouTube. Thank you to this month's sponsor, Kruger Puppets. And we are now available on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts. You can also visit Diane Jones's website at forgetmenotproduction.com to keep up to date on the travels of the Forget Me Not show and to support our local arts as well. So without further ado, my name's John Szablewski, and this has been another episode of Why Bother?